Welcome to tonight's Planning Commission meeting. Roll call, please.
Banks? Here. Alderman Hendler?
Yes.
Pinker?
Yes.
Rosendich? Here. Caprillion and Wood are absent today. But we do have a quorum.
We do have a quorum. All right, good. Item number 3, approval of the minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from the November 19th? Mr. Pinker's and Mrs. Banks is a second. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 4, citizens' comments. Would anyone from the public wish to address the Planning Commission? Anyone from the public? Seeing no one, we'll go on to item number 5, conditional use request by Boost Gym to allow for an indoor commercial entertainment land use fitness gym within the L1 zoning district located at 3013 South Central Avenue, parcel 33-07366, presented by Evan Monson, Associate Planner.
Thank you, Mayor. As you just say, this is a conditional use permit request for Boost Gym. It is a fitness gym, especially more in powerlifting and heavy lifting. This land use technically is considered an indoor commercial entertainment land use per the zoning code. As a result of that, it requires a conditional use permit for the LI Light Industrial Zoning District as a conditional use. We go to the next slide here. Basically, the LI zoning district is mainly centered more towards manufacturing, light industrial activity, assembly, processing activities. Uses such as these sometimes can be permitted, sometimes not. Hence why it's a conditional use, not permitted by right. If we want to go to the next slide, this shows you where in town this is at. It's on South Central, across from technically the airport campus is on the right. Then some other light industrial properties are surrounding it here in this side of town. Go to the next slide. Basically for the analysis, looking at this, the site does meet zoning requirements for the zoning district. It also does meet the requirements for the specific land use. The lot has ample space for parking. Mainly the only applicable requirements for this land use that would apply to this, since it's not abutting residential or anything, would be parking requirements. The site does have ample parking. If they were to expand parking in the future, though, they would have to hard surface that. If the Planning Commission were to want to waive that requirement for hard surface and parking, they may. If you were to attach a condition to this request, or if you were to grant a future conditional use permit. It won't be at a high intensity use. Kyle, the owner of the business, states it's kind of more of a smaller gym, but if it were to expand, he thinks he would probably move locations before expanding at the site. Due to that fact, we wouldn't really consider this much of an adverse impact. It'd probably be better for a neighborhood to be next to a gym than some sort of industrial property. So following that, we will go to our recommendation. Staff would recommend approving the conditional use request by Boost Gym to allow for indoor commercial entertainment land use within the LI zoning district located at 3013 South Central Ave.
Thank you, Evan. This item does require a public hearing. At this time, I'll open up the floor to members of the public who wish to address the Planning Commission. Anyone from the public wish to address the commission? Second call. Final call. Anyone from the public wish to address the commission? Seeing no one, we'll close the public hearing and we'll look for a motion to approve. Motion by Mr. Rosendich, second by Mrs. Banks. Discussion. Mr. Pinker.
Good number of items here. First, I want to thank the gentleman for being in a position to make this conditional use request. This causes us to take a look at the wording in the ordinance, and perhaps for future discussion, we can look at this particular district. Specifically states in the intent that this is for large and small scale industrial and office development and geared to indoor industrial activities. And there's probably 60 to 65% of these items that I think you got to stretch your imagination that they fit that particular category. That being said, Evan, in his materials, cited Chapter 7 in the comprehensive plan, and he specifically noted this is an example of entrepreneurship, and I fully agree with that. But I think based upon what this gentleman is doing, I think we can very much looked for approval on the basis of something else in chapter number 7. The type of gym he has is certainly a very niche activity with a rather specific and well-dedicated clientele. And this very easily fits into the niche tourism that's noted in chapter 7. It's also an attractive point for unique activity. And the chapter 7 specifically notes physical activities. And if we take a look at chapter 9, which I think has to balance what's in chapter 7, though chapter 9 may lean towards, shall we say, opposing this, chapter 9 does have some interesting aspects to it. And this gentleman, with his operation, is going to be one of the newest, if not the newest, commercial enterprise in that part of town. And seeing as though a lot of development is moving in north side of Marshfield, he fits into, say, a unique development perspective that he's going to be one of the first new businesses in the South Central Gateway area, which doesn't seem to be attracting a lot of attention from people. And when you look at future zoning in chapter 9, that light industrial area is being split along Central Avenue. So part of that is going to be split in half. He would be very nicely fit into a future development area. So I think approval here on a number of reasons is certainly warranted. I will vote yes on this.
Thank you. Anything further from the commission? Seeing nothing further, then all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 6, conditional use request by Amy Cole to allow for an accessory apartment within the Prairie Run Plan Development located at 1807 Prairie Drive, parcel 250-2603-314-0942, zoned PD Plan Development. Presenter Bryce Hembrook, City Planner.
Thank you, Mayor. So the applicant is looking to be allowed to add an accessory apartment unit to the existing garage. The existing garage is located on a commercial property, the Prairie Run Dental Clinic. And this is located in the commercial district of the Prairie Run Plan Development. So the existing garage is 720 square feet and approximately 15 feet tall. The proposed garage with the addition would increase that to a ground floor area of 1,380 square feet in size. The proposed land use was created specifically for the commercial district in the Prairie Run Plan Development. So this is the only location in which they can request this sort of land use. And the land use was created during the September Plan Commission meeting. So the definition of an accessory apartment is a separate and complete dwelling unit that is contained on the same lot as a structure of a single family dwelling or business. And then the applicants plan to use this apartment as their primary residence in the future. Overall, the subject property is just under an acre in size, and building coverage of the lot would be under 25% with the proposed addition. The proposed addition will also meet all setback and height requirements and will remain 20 feet from the property line to the north. So they're not moving to the north, but I think the south and the west. So here's the location map. This is where the Prairie Run Dental Clinic is. And so as you can see in the subject property, the larger yellow structure is the clinic, and then the accessory apartment to the northeast is where the apartment would go. So here's the existing garage. And then here's a site plan showing that they would remain 20 feet from the north and same distance to the east, I believe at 29 feet. And then they would extend to the south and a little bit to the west. Here's a floor plan showing their intentions. It's a little hard to see the actual floor plan, but it's just a simple apartment unit with, I think, one bedroom, one bath. And then here's some elevations. So the addition is proposed to match the current style of the existing garage, as well as the principal structure. And it will also match in similar colors. The first floor will consist of mainly brick, which would kind of match with the existing garage. And then the second floor would mainly consist of LP SmartSide wood lap siding. And the roof will consist of asphalt shingles. So overall, the proposed addition appears to attempt to blend in with the principal structure on site and with some of the neighboring properties. So I'll just quickly go over the neighborhood setting. So the closest structure is a single-family residence to the north. It's approximately 55 feet, right about where the PD sign would be to the north of the structure. The houses to the north and northeast are made of high quality materials and have higher home values than most of the homes in Marshfield. And they are mainly one-story ranches, except for I think 1 or 2-story residential buildings. The land to the east is owned by a church, and most of that land is vacant. To the south, there is also vacant land that is proposed to be used for commercial use. And then to the west, there is a 4-unit townhouse development. And also, just as a reminder, if the Plan Commission would like to add a requirement for like landscape buffer, they can do so. I added maybe a hypothetical in the staff report. But with that, staff would recommend to approve the conditional use request by Amy Cole to allow for an accessory apartment within the Prairie Run development with the following conditions. Number 1, minor site changes may be administratively approved, provided the plans and designs do not differ from the architectural design elements of the principal commercial building. And number 2, the accessory apartment shall not be sold separately from the principal commercial structure.
Thank you very much. This item does require a public hearing. At this time, I'll open up the floor to members of the public who wish to address the Planning Commission. Anyone from the public wish to address the commission? Second call, anyone from the public? Final call, anyone wish to address the commission? Seeing no one, we'll close the public hearing. I'll entertain a motion to approve. Motion by Mrs. Banks, second by Mr. Pinker. We'll begin discussion. One of the things, this looks like a beautiful place, but I know one of the things that we talked about when this was here before is to make sure that this will fit within there's a development, not a development agreement in there, but CC&Rs to make sure that the homeowners association would approve of this. Was that done?
To my knowledge, it has not been done. And it's one of those situations where either way it'd have to get approved through us, whether or not that process is gone through. So it's kind of, I'm not too sure. We've looked through the covenants and it's not too clear on if an accessory building would have to be under the same scrutiny. But as far as, it's kind of hard to say, yeah, we'll go through that process when we don't even know if it's permitted in the right through the city. So it was one of those things where we weren't too sure on what should be gone through first, what process that all entails. But regardless, this would have to be permitted here first before anything approved. So there may be a chance that it would be approved through that, but I don't know exactly if they went through that process.
So what happens if we approve it? Because it's, clear it's going to be good quality work and would fit with the run of the land, if you will. But then what will happen if then that development does not allow it because it's not a single family home? Then would the applicant have the ability to build?
Yeah, and so, that's a good question.
Excuse me. Because basically it's a covenant with that Prairie Run subdivision, which is a private property agreement amongst the property owners. So they would ultimately have to work through that process if that's a requirement. And I think us reading it couldn't determine whether what the requirement was or what the process was to get approval through that. So that would be something they'd have to work through with their covenants for that subdivision. But I know they're present here if you wanted to ask them, what they've done or if they've discussed that with anybody.
Did you already go to the association just to see if it would?
And I emailed Aaron Staub, and I didn't really, all he sent me back was the covenants that I was already reading. So as far as I know, there's nothing to add. He didn't say that, he didn't set up a meeting for it or anything. So yeah, he just responded with those covenants, and after reading it, I didn't see anything that would entail that. However, it's also not on my final say for that. But yeah, I guess if
What I
there,
don't want to do is get the owner in a legal situation and the city in a legal situation. If we're saying, yes, you can go ahead and build there, now we're challenging those CC&Rs and those bylaws. That's not a good situation for anybody. I guess for me, it would make sense to get that approval first because it's running with the land. So it's, I would think that from our perspective, this is a good thing, but if they get the approval from the city that, yeah, you can go ahead and do it, then that gets us into an issue with that development that is currently single-family home.
yes, but at the same time, the covenants aren't really something that we necessarily, there's a bunch of covenants throughout the.
I get that. I just
city
want this noted,
Right.
that when this came up before, that was one of my requests.
Yep.
So I want that to be noted in the minutes, that I did that for a reason.
Okay.
Anything further? No? All right. Seeing no further discussion then, all those in favor, please say aye. Opposed? All right, motion carries. Number 7, master sign plan amendment request by Pizza Ranch, represented by Stratford Sign Company, to amend a previously approved master sign plan located at 1302A North Central Avenue, presented by Evan Monson.
Thank you, Mayor. As you just stated, this is an amendment to a previous master sign plan. The property here at 1302 North Central has a master sign plan for the multiple tenants on the site. It was last amended back in 2012, which was a little while ago. Since then, obviously, there's been some changes. Pizza Ranch is now taking over the former Figgy's location there on the side. They're adding some new on-building signage as well as adding some signage onto the pylon out front along the highway. As you've probably driven by, the one pylon has the Shopco sign. The new Pizza Ranch sign would be below that and below the Mattress Firm sign on that pylon. And then in the current location on the building where the former Figgy's space was, there would be new Pizza Ranch signage on there. So if we go to the next slide, you can kind of see it's a unique lot where our building is technically connected to Shopco still, but there's a legal property line cutting through. The one facade part is actually on the other part of the property, and then Shopco has their own sign on this property, so it's kind of a little unique. But as noted, the Pizza Ranch signs would be facing north and east on the building, then obviously on the pylon over towards the highway. Going to the next slide. Looking at the previous plan, there's different allowed and existing signage requirements. There's a list of the current signage existing. As you can tell, the two signs that were the Figgy spots before are going to be replaced in the future with Pizza Ranch signage. If we want to go to the next slide here, this is obviously the pylon along the highway. There'd be a new sign for Pizza Ranch that would be added on as part of this amendment. If we go to the next slide, and this would be the facades and the signage that would be on the buildings. Obviously, it would say Pizza Ranch because that's the restaurant, so then everyone knows where to go. Go to the next slide here. And to sum up the amendments of how they're looking to redo the master sign plan, basically we would allow different signage based on the facades, and then as the pylon, before it was kind of bunched together a little bit differently than it would be here under the new amendment. And so the main changes would be to allow building signage based off of the percentage of the building facade. And as noted, that would give you different allowable square feet on each facade. So if we go to the next slide, our staff recommendation would be to approve this master sign plan amendment request. The only condition would be that future signage on the property may be administratively approved, provided it does not require exceptions from the requirements of the sign code, and provided that the total signage for each facade or location does not exceed the limits presented in Table 4 of this report.
Thank you, Evan. Is there a motion to approve? Motion by Mr. Rosendich, second by Mrs. Banks. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 8, review and approval of the proposed Marshfield Outdoor Aquatic Center located at 1805 South Rhodes Avenue. Presenter Josh Miller, Development Services Director.
Thank you, Mayor. State statute 6223, parent 5, talks about how the city Plan Commission has to review new public buildings and facilities for architectural design and location. And so that's what we're here to do tonight. There's been a long history of this project. It goes back a number of years. The need for a new pool. The current pool is 85 years old, and so it lacks a lot of amenities that many pools in the region have, or aquatic facilities have. And so the Plan Commission, or excuse me, the Common Council has been reviewing this for a while. And they had identified back in 2017 that the location of the pool would be on its current location in the Wildwood Park. I included kind of a timeline and a history of those, of some of those discussions and history in the staff report. But what I wanted to do tonight is kind of go over some of the planning documents that identify this location and that support the location for the current pool or for the new pool. Just, I guess I want to take a quick step back. In review of these types of requests, the statutes don't give a lot of guidance as to what the Plan Commission's charge is. It's pretty kind of open-ended. It just says the Plan Commission shall review and make a report, final report to the Common Council. So it doesn't say, what are the criteria it should be proving this on or reviewing this against. And so really, staff is suggesting that the Plan Commission may want to decide whether the project is supported within the contents of the city's planning documents and planning efforts to date. And I think that we can do that through looking at the comprehensive plan and the comprehensive outdoor recreation plan. When the comprehensive plan was adopted, the most recent edition in 2017, it had not been determined where the new pool location would be. It had, excuse me, it had identified that this was a possible location in both the utilities and community facilities section and others. And in that section, it talked about if the pool is to relocate or locate on this site to make sure that there's some cooperation between the utilities and the pool project. And the comprehensive plan generally stays at kind of a higher level when talking about specific projects. It references the core plan. And as I said, they didn't have an exact direction on where that pool project was going to go. So it's not going to state in that comprehensive plan, it's a 20-year plan, where a project's going to go when there hasn't been the initial study or analysis of it. So back in 2017, there was a full project committee commissioned essentially, or put together, identifying, looking at 20 different sites. They came up with a number of criteria. And through that criteria, they narrowed it down to a few sites, but the current NAFCO pool site was far and away the preferred site for the location. There was also a survey done as part of the corporate comprehensive outdoor rec plan that identified 70% supported the additional or new pool project. A lot of it referring to cooperation with the YMCA and an indoor pool. But reading through the comments, most of the comments supported establishing a new pool at the current site. So there was a lot of support for that in that survey. So what our charge is tonight is to really identify the location and to look at the architectural design of the pool. So if we can go, this is the general location. As you can see, this is on the south end of town in Wildwood Park, north of the current Marshfield Utilities office space. Go to the next slide, please. This is the layout. And I think these plans are 60% complete, Justin. Is that right? So 60% complete, but this is essentially the layout that's being proposed. Parking to the north, and I'll turn it over to Justin a little bit to go over the project in more detail, but just wanted to give you kind of the architecture of it. So we go to the next slide. This is the layout with the different amenities. You can see the layout of the pool house, which is the north structure on the property. And then you can see the two different water vessels on the south. And then there's obviously some areas outdoors with a shelter for picnic areas and sunny areas and umbrellas, amenities like that. Excuse me. Let me go to the next slide. I'm sorry. It's really throwing me off.
Mr. Butke normally has candies here.
Yeah, it's just, I apologize. Anyways, this is one of the outdoor shelter structures that kind of has a similar look and feel to some of the structures in the Wildwood Pavilion or the Wildwood Zoo already. And this is the bathhouse or the pool house. This top elevation is the view looking from the parking lot, so view facing north. You can see there's the gable end is facing big, beautiful windows on the north or on the top part of it, allowing a lot of natural light into kind of the lobby area. And then there's a number of horizontal windows that allow light in there without people being able to look in and see into the facility. And on the south end, you can see that there's a number of doors coming out from the locker room areas and then there's a concession stand and stuff like that. So you can see the north, I keep saying north, sorry. the roof structure is kind of an evergreen color, which will match similar to our park facilities. And then you'll have that kind of that brown exterior siding, and then the concrete, kind of the concrete foundation part that'll be kind of a brick, kind of half wall thing that again matches sort of the Wildwood Station and other facilities. So it'll have a really good architectural feel to it. You'll have familiarity that you're in the Wildwood park, and it'll look great in that area. Excuse me. So with that, I'll turn it over to Justin to kind of walk through a little bit more of the amenities and the features of the park or of the pool. And I'll cover a couple other things at the end.
Well, you did a good job of going through everything, first of all, Josh. If you want to go back to C200, I just want to get the commission to reference. The hotel is located to the north of that, northeast. The mobile homes are to that northwest, just as it currently is with the current situation at HEFCO. The parking lot, obviously directly south of the hotel and the mobile home parks. We will have driveway access off of Central and off of Rodis. There'll be a sidewalk that will be attempting to connect to the trail by the train, the new trail that was done, the Wildwood Station McMillan Trail connection. So individuals from all the way up from McMillan can take that trail all the way down to the pool. I will switch to the next slide, C202. As Josh mentioned, there'll be a full-service concession, a lobby, men's and women's locker rooms, 4 family changing rooms, a lifeguard area and office, obviously the pool mechanical rooms, plenty of deck space. There'll be plenty of green space. Green space meaning grass. We'll have a family reservable pavilion and a game area. The game area will entail concrete ping pong, concrete cornhole game, and concrete foosball. That way they can stay out year round. They'll have tube slides, lazy river, an active play structure, a rock wall, diving boards. We'll have both a low dive, which is 1 meter, and a high dive, which is a 3 meter diving well, and a number of shade structures. If you want to go to the next one, C800, that was just it's a rentable shelter that families can reserve. It's first come, first serve. It's not rentable, but we anticipate this to be used for private parties, pretty much for families. The next one is obviously the building design. It's the bathhouse itself. It shows the elevation from the north and the south. And the next slide is from the east and the west. This material and style is similar to all of the current facilities at the zoo. So the maintenance building, the Ludwig building, and now the Cougar exhibit. So it would be made out of the same material with that split face block on the bottom, followed by a forever side or a smart side mahogany color, followed by what I call green storefront fascia. Other than that, I think that pretty much sums up the project. Here to answer any questions, or if Josh or guys.
Yeah, just thank you, Justin. Nice job on that. Just one final kind of comment here is that the property is zoned general industrial right now. One of the things that we do have to address is parceling off the property, surveying it to separate this property from the rest of the zoo and what's to the south with the Marshall Utilities office building. So that line has not been determined yet where that property line will go, but we make sure that the setbacks are met. Then following that, a rezoning would have to take place to, we don't feel probably, I think legally we could probably put a pool in a general industrial zoning district, but probably the best thing would be to rezone it to community mixed use, which would be a commercial zoning, which would fit with the, be more fitting with what's being proposed. So that'll be something that would be brought forward at a later date, but so far plans are moving along pretty good, and we've reviewed this with the development review team, and Justin and his team are working hard to make sure the zoning and the landscaping and all those things are being complied with. And staff recommendation would be to approve the location and architectural design of the new proposed outdoor aquatic center located at 1805 South Rhodes Avenue for a public building based on findings that the site has been identified in planning documents as a possible location for the new outdoor aquatic facility. The site has been vetted by the pool study committee to be the best location for the facility, and the architectural design of the pool house is of good quality and fitting in the neighborhood with other facilities.
Thank you. Motion to approve. Motion by Mr. Rosendich, second by Mrs. Banks. Any discussion? Mr. Penker. Mr. Penker, can you bring that mic down?
Considering how important this is, I ask.
Any further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, please roll call vote.
Penker? Aye. Banks?
Aye.
Rosendich?
Aye.
Hendler? Mayor McManus?
Aye.
All ayes. Motion to approve. Thank you.
All right. 9, review and discussion on the current regulations pertaining to operating short-term rental housing in the city of Marshfield, presented Bryce Hembrook, City Planner.
Thank you, Mayor. So short-term rentals, for example, those would be Airbnbs, VRBO, and other similar kind of rentals that are intended to be rented out to visitors and guests for less than 30 days. So these short-term rentals continue to gain popularity, especially in Wisconsin, with us being a popular summer destination from for people from Illinois, particularly. One of the things that our state wants to do is to make some changes on how a municipality can or cannot regulate these rentals. So I'll quickly go over our current zoning requirements. So currently we only permit these by conditional use in the city's mixed use zoning districts, which would be a neighborhood mixed use district, urban mixed use district, downtown mixed use district, and community mixed use district. Most short-term rentals would be rented out of single-family residences. There's not too many single-family residences in these mixed-use districts. These districts are more intended for commercial use and the occasional residential use. We currently refer to this land use as tourist house, which I included the definition in the staff report and on the screen here. It's rather lengthy, so essentially it's just a dwelling unit available for overnight, weekend, or weekly stays, and it would not be considered a bed and breakfast, commercial indoor lodging, or boarding house land use. We also have some current regulations that I included in the staff report. So the new state requirements, the following changes have been approved by the states as a way to regulate how municipalities can regulate these uses. So local governments can regulate but not prohibit short-term rentals. So essentially, municipalities cannot outright ban rentals of a residential dwelling for a period of 7 consecutive days or longer, ending at, the statute actually says 29 days, but they're going to try to change that to 30 consecutive days. So essentially, municipality cannot ban from 7, 30 days. What municipalities can do is we can ban any short-term rentals, 6 days or less. Municipalities can also place reasonable regulations and can require owners to obtain a local permit. So for example, we wouldn't be able to say a short-term rental cannot be located within 3 miles from another short-term rental. That would be considered unreasonable because that would basically limit the city to, a handful of rentals that would be allowed. Short-term rentals are defined by the state officially as a residential dwelling that is offered for rent for a fee and for fewer than 29 days. As I mentioned, they're going to be changing this or they're planning to change this to 30 days. So overall, we can also limit the total number of days that they are rented. So for example, we can limit to no less than 180 days in a calendar year, but we could limit it to 200, 250 if we would like. And we can also place a limit on from, January until July or some other combination. Owners of short-term rentals and lodging marketplaces are also required to collect state sales and use tax and any room tax owed from the person renting the residential dwelling. So we are also able to charge a local room tax. And then anyone who manages or operates a short-term rental for more than 10 nights each year is now required to obtain a tourist rooming house from the state. So the state and the county, they have sanitarians that go and inspect these for health and safety requirements. And then I created a table just showing the differences between some similar land uses. I had a couple people ask me, what is a short-term rental compared to a bed and breakfast, a boarding house, et cetera? So the main thing with a bed and breakfast is that is where breakfast is served, and then it also talks about they're available for rent for more than 10 nights during a 12-month period. Those are also regulated by the state and county. A boarding house, so our current zoning code is a little open-ended with a boarding house definition. Boarding house includes any residential use with shared bathroom, living, or kitchen facilities. In our upcoming zoning code change recommendations, we would probably make this more specific so it's not confused as easily with short-term rental. And then a long-term rental is any house, any residential unit that is available for rent over 30 days. So your typical duplex that gets rented out for a year would be a long-term rental. And then I also included some examples. So short-term rentals are most of the listings on Airbnb, VRBO, not all of them. Boarding house would be Mary's Place Boarding House in the former Catnap Corner. There are no established bed and breakfasts in the city of Marshfield, but there is in Stevens Point. And then long-term rental, as I mentioned, duplex that's rented for 6 or 12 months, or single-family house as well. So here's what some other municipalities do. It's kind of across the board, but so essentially Stevens Point determines whether or not it needs a conditional use permit, whether the owner resides on the property at the same time as the renters are renting it out, or if they are not on the property at the same time, then they need a conditional use permit. They also collect room tax, and no city license is required, but county license is required. NENA requires a permit. Oshkosh requires a license and a room tax permit. La Crosse, it looks like they haven't changed their regulations since this update. So they have a conditional use in several districts. It appears that it's not conforming. Wausau is currently working on their zoning code draft, and so they have a city license that is similar to Oshkosh and NENA, except for there's a lot of regulations, but that's not finalized. And Lake Geneva has much similar one to Wausau, and then Minocqua requires a license. So here's some options that we kind of presented as a way for the city to regulate these short-term rentals. Option number one, do not regulate short-term rentals at the local level. The property owner would still need to get a license from the county and the state. And we could still collect room taxes if we did this option. However, it's a little bit harder to track who's actually running this or not unless we collect this information from the county or the state. Option two would be to allow short-term rentals as an accessory land use permitted by right in all zoning districts, and create a license for short-term rental owners or managers who plan to rent out their property for 7 to 29 or 30 days. So the main purpose of this of this license would be to track where the rentals will be located and to collect local room taxes. Inspections for health and safety are completed at the state and county level, so we wouldn't necessarily need to have our building inspectors check. So we think that we could keep the license fee to be reasonable, around $10 to $25. Then any zoning related regulations can be placed on a rental, so we can keep some of our same regulations if we would like, as long as they are reasonable, such as requiring a certain number of parking spaces or signage. Option 3 is essentially the same as option 2, except for we could allow for rentals under 7 days. So that could be, a 1-day rental, 3-day rental, 5-day rental, etc. This would allow for people to rent out their property for a night or a weekend, as long as they have their license and fees paid for. This is the easiest in terms of tracking and ensuring that renters are actually following regulations. And this is staff's preferred option because it's just easier for us to track. I forgot to mention earlier that one of the issues with for most municipalities is tracking where these are actually located and who is running them, because when you search the site, you have to pick a certain number of days in order to see how many listings there are. So there was one time in the summer where there was 12 listings in the city. And then for the other 10 or 12 times that I checked, there's around 5 listings. It also doesn't show the exact location of these rentals. It shows the general vicinity within probably a quarter mile. So if there's no exterior pictures, it's kind of hard for us to track, where these are at. So creating a license where we try to get the word out and say, hey, we want you guys to come in, get this license, and then we can kind of keep track of it. Is better than just, a lot of people don't really realize that there are regulations to this, I'm sure. So that's why we think that's probably the best option. It would be hard for us to track who's renting it out for 7 days compared to 6 or 3. So we think that would be probably the best option. Option 4 would be to continue to regulate this land use as a conditional use, but add to all zoning districts. So we have to allow for any residential structure owner to at least rent out for 7 to 29 days. So we would have to add these to all districts. This would allow for the Plan Commission and Common Council to have a little bit more control on some required standards. And we can recommend regulations if considered reasonable and measurable. Once again, the city can choose the limit, whether we want to do 7 to 30 days or under 7. And one of the issues with this is there's an increase in staff time to prepare for these meetings. And then there is a significant increase to the cost to the applicant because there are kind of hefty fees to pay through the state and county. So it's not too sure how many people would go through that when they have to spend around probably $700 in total just to rent out their property. So those are the 4 options. Now we can go any certain way. However, those are mostly what other municipalities are doing, especially ones that are our size. And so with that, in the staff report, I had direct staff to develop an ordinance for future discussion that was supposed to read future consideration. So with that, staff would like to recommend directing staff to develop an ordinance for future consideration.
And in doing so, are you saying on any one of those options or just?
Yeah, so basically, we would like to have feedback on what the Plan Commission would like for us to go as an option, or what we can look into, bringing forward to the Common Council. So I was anticipating maybe some discussion first, and then kind of get a feel how they're doing, and then we can take it down. Or is it back?
No, at this point, we're just looking for discussion. And I guess I'd stay away from a motion at this point, just give general direction to the city staff to come back. We can continue this discussion. I know we've got another meeting at 7 o'clock, but there's no precedent, or there's no pressing need to get this done today or next month, but we want to get going in that direction just because that's been brought up by council. And and to make sure we are following state statute. So at this point, just kind of open for discussion, and we can continue that discussion in January if need be.
Any discussion from the commission? Ms. Spanks?
How do you classify Ronald McDonald House and House of the Dove?
Yeah, so Ronald McDonald House, I think, would be institutional residential land use. So that is considered an institutional land use. It really depends on the specific type. So that would be institutional residential. House of the Dove, I'm not too familiar with, but I believe that that would be also institutional residential.
Further discussion? Mr. Pinker?
I'll direct this question to you. Seeing as though you're chairman here and also basically chairman for the Common Council, what's your preference? Would you prefer to have it come through us, or would you prefer to have the council review this report and then circle back to us with any recommendations or concerns they'd have?
I think it would be good to start here in the commission.
Okay,
And then once you've got a meeting of the minds, then take it to the council, because the
Okay.
council can always, they would get the minutes of the meeting, so they would know. So I would, that would be my preference.
Okay.
However, I'm just one.
because I'd like to hear what the councils have got to say vis-a-vis this report, and then cycle it back to us after they have a discussion, however lengthy that might be.
And
But
if
I'll
that,
go either way. I don't have a
and
preference.
if that is the preference of the commission, that's certainly fine by me. We can run it by council, and then, well, if council approves it, would it need to come back?
Yeah, we would still have a public hearing for our ordinance, so there would still have to, the ultimate, when we're ready to adopt an ordinance and regulations, that would actually come to the plan commission. Public hearing would be held, and then that would be adopted by, if the council agrees with it, they could adopt it by ordinance. So I think the appropriate discussion time is during the plan commission meeting. However, I understand Mr. Pinker's comment about wanting to get some feedback from the council, because they're actually, when this item came up as a future agenda item, there was some good discussion about some concerns, some things to look at, so.
That we forward the report to the council. And I hope I'm not speaking too much out of line for the rest of the people, but direct them to consider option number 3.
And have staff prepare their ordinance based on number 3. Is that fair from the commission?
I agree.
Mr. Hendler? All right. You good with that?
Yeah, I guess to clarify, so you're asking us to prepare an ordinance or just a discussion, like a report going to council first and then coming back, or? I'm trying to think of the. Okay,
Mr. Pinker put the mic down, so that's right.
Yeah, shoot this report and any other ancillary information you've got over to the council with option 3 as our preference, and see what kind of discussion the council comes up with. They may have another option that they're looking at.
thank you.
All right. Item number 10, items for future agendas.
Airbnbs probably.
Airbnb is going to be coming back soon.
And I will also be reporting to the Plan Commission on our housing affordability report and our housing fee report. These were 2 requirements that were required through the state. So we're thinking January meeting. So we'll be coming back with that.
All right. How about any item number 11, any staff updates?
At this time, have a good holiday.
No. All right. Planning Commission, thank you very much for your service. We've had a great year. It's been a lot of fun. Hope you have great holidays. All right, we are adjourned.